Well, in actual fact, Nicola Sturgeon does intend to follow the letter of the law. That is why it's been taken to the Supreme Court to decide on what should happen.
She knows it's against the law, Austin.
Taking the correct path, making sure that we're fully law-abiding. And Nicola Sturgeon is the elected head of government in Scotland. That is the reality of it. So if you are not going to take into account the views that the people of Scotland have expressed in electing Nicola Sturgeon as First Minister, of course it's disrespectful to the people of Scotland. But we all know that what Liz Truss was saying in the debate last night was all bluster. It was just pandering to her Tory audience. But I'll tell you what, though, it did give us a great insight to the utter contempt that the Tories show towards devolution and how people in Scotland vote. They just plan to ignore us. So if that's the strategy to save the Union, I'm up for it.
Alan Cochrane, is that the risk of Sturgeon's comments, that you'll get the SNP saying exactly what Austin just said?
No. I mean, I find this very amusing. I mean, the SNP they're in the intensive care unit at the SNP about their plans for independence. They haven't got a hope in hell of getting either their Indie Ref 2 or any success out of it. The idea that anything that Liz Truss has said is damaging the SNP's case, they're already in deep trouble. And what we must remember is, Nicola, I'm sorry we keep using first name, we're all on pals up here. The idea that this is an insult to Scotland. This is Nicola portraying herself again as Mother Scotland. This was a pure political spat between two politicians, big girls with good, tough policies to sell. Liz Truss and Nicola Sturgeon. The idea that Nicola will lie awake at night worrying about this, the only thing she'll worry about is can she get on the telly tomorrow morning?
Well, exactly, because Angela Epstein, I mean, Sturgeon is playing politics all the time. Even when she congratulated the Lionesses on Sunday, she felt the need to play identity politics. So is this not just Truss playing her at her own game?
Not really. I think what Liz Truss is sort of suggesting, not that I agree with the pejorative way that she said it, I think she is better than that because it sounded terribly bitchy. But I think what she's saying is that while Nicola Sturgeon continues to be a single-issue politician, then there's nothing to listen to. If she's not going to talk about or will be distracted by the prospect of trying to get a referendum and won't talk about record waiting lists in A&E in Scotland or the attainment gap, you know, the poor educational services that need addressing and all the other social issues that prevail in Scotland, and instead completely is consumed by the idea of having another referendum, then what is there to listen to? It happened in 2014. It was supposed to be a once-in-a-generation vote, and Nicola Sturgeon is like the toddler who won't go to bed. However much you tell her that it's bedtime, she won't listen.
Yes.
I mean, she enjoyed being a statesman and having all that statesmanship during the pandemic.
Yes, she loved being on the TV every day.
She loved that. The social distancing, the lockdown went on longer. And there was no discernible difference in Omicron cases and Delta cases there were in the rest of the UK. She loves the stage. But she has to be ignored if all she will talk about is a referendum that simply cannot happen.
Yeah, I mean, James Melville, I'm sorry. She said it was a once-in-a-generation referendum. She knows her proposal is against the law. So, actually, why should Liz Truss do anything other than ignore her when it comes to Indie Ref 2?
Oh, it's much more existential than that, Dan. It's about democracy. It's about freedom, of which you're a champion of freedom.
You had your vote. You had your vote. You can't keep having votes, James, until you get your way. It's not how it works.
Circumstances have changed because a number of things have come down the track since the last one. We're looking at in terms of the will of the people in Scotland, in terms of Brexit. They voted very, very differently. Also, in terms of the response to COVID, you've got different economic conditions. Now, whether it's a yes vote or a no vote next time, it's up to the will of the people to decide. It's a bit rich coming from Liz Truss, who's about to try and become Prime Minister based on 200,000 votes from Tory members, giving a lecture to Nicola Sturgeon, who I'm not much of a fan of, by the way, but I am a fan about democracy and about freedom and the right for citizens in a country to choose their own fate. I think it's time for another referendum. And if it's a no vote, that will actually settle things, I think, for quite a long time, because circumstances have changed since the last one. It's up to the people of Scotland to decide, not Liz Truss, who's on a bogus premise, false premise of democracy, to try and become Prime Minister based on 200,000 Tory members' votes. So that's a bit rich coming from her.
Emma Webb, you think, even though you're against the idea of a second referendum, you think it would be a mistake for Truss to just ignore Sturgeon?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Liz Truss's comments were frankly glib. I think it would be unwise for any future Prime Minister, obviously, to ignore the democratically elected First Minister of Scotland. But I think fundamentally the problem here, the problem at the heart of this, is that devolution has been a complete failure. What it has done instead of secure the union is actually arm separatists and is now threatening the constitutional integrity of this country. And I think that the suggestions that what Liz Truss is really representing here is a kind of muscular unionism, and that she is being far more outspoken than any other potential leadership candidate or leader of the Conservative Party has been. I think that there is a real convincing aspect to that muscular unionism when we're seeing so many threats to the union also in relation to Northern Ireland. And so I think there's the suggestions that we need potentially to pass some kind of legislation, perhaps another act of union, in order to secure the integrity and sovereignty of the United Kingdom as a whole. I think that the arguments for that are extremely convincing.
Austin, one thing Nicola Sturgeon doesn't seem to want to speak about is Scotland's record drug deaths. Last week, the figures were announced again. Scotland continues to have by far the highest drug death rate recorded by any country in Europe. What's Sturgeon and the SNP going to do to deal with that epidemic? And it wouldn't be better to spend more money and attention on that rather than this futile push for indie referendum 2?
So what I welcome is there was a reduction in drug deaths, but you are right, Dan, it is still far too high. There does have to be more attention and more resources put in place, and I'm sure that the Scottish Government will respond to that in full. But when we were having a wee chat about Nicola Sturgeon's response to pandemics, I really do have to pick with something that a panellist said earlier on about how Nicola Sturgeon enjoyed being on the TV every day.
She did.
I
could tell just by watching her. She loves the power trip.
We were dealing with a worldwide pandemic where people were dying, and Nicola Sturgeon stood and she faced the nation on a daily basis to update them on what was going on.
She got off on it, I think.
Boris Johnson was number 10. The senior members of the government having parties and sticking the two fingers up to the British public. That's the marked contrast difference between the SNP administration in Edinburgh and the Tory administration in London.
Alan Cochrane, I just raised the point of the Scottish record drug deaths. No answer from Austin, of course.
Dan, this is my hometown. It's Dundee. That is at the top of the hit parade. And it's an absolute disgrace. You're absolutely right. The nationalists have been in power, in charge of the health policy, and the health secretary is a Dundee MSP. The current, her undersecretary was also a Dundee MSP, and the death toll is absolutely staggering. So what needs to happen is a note of candour needs to be injected into the relationship between the UK government and the Scottish government. And I think my initial response to Liz Truss was it's a bit daft, but basically what she has done is put the boot in with a bit of candour in relationships between UK and that Tory you quoted, Gavin Barwell. He was part of the problem. Conservative governments have been paying lip service to devolution, shoveling more policies to them all the way along the history of devolution, and they've done nothing with the powers.
Yeah, no, indeed. And look, ignore her on Indie Ref 2. That's what I'd say. Hold her to account on issues like Scotland's record drug deaths. Thank you so much.